Welcome to the Liquidity Event, a show about all things personal finance with a laser focus on taxes, financial independence, and equity compensation. Hosted by AJ and Shane of Brooklyn FI, each episode will focus on a personal finance topic, some driven by news headlines and sometimes driven by listener questions. And sometimes you'll just get two money nerds rambling about what they think is interesting. Just a quick note before we get started, this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered tax or investment advice.
Hello and welcome to the Liquidity Event. We are your host, Shane Mason.
And John Owens for AJ this week.
That's right, baby. We got Mr. Owens in the seat this week. AJ is what? She's in Scotland?
She's in California, future-proofing herself.
I just like to make stuff up. Yes, AJ is in a conference out in California, hanging out with some of the best financial advisors in the country. What's the band that they're having this year? Last year we had...
Third Eye Blind's going to be there.
Oh, fuck. Okay,
I'll never let you go.
Oh, cool. She's going to love that. My buddy posted a photo of him at Barclays watching Weezer from like row 4007. I was like, oh man, one of the best things about going to financial planning conferences is occasionally they'll drop a bag. And we were front row for Weezer, and like AJ grabbed Rivers Cuomo's like shoes or like his pick off the ground, which was sick. Anyway, quick reminder for you listeners: we will answer your questions on the pod. If you leave us a message, you can disguise your voice and use a fake name and like the CIA blackout box if you want. The link is memo.com, memo.fm/the Liquidity Event. I hate that we have it here phonetically. I always screw it up in the introduction. This is episode 119, being recorded on September 10th and airing on September 13th. John, how are we doing,
I think
buddy?
we're wrong about that. We're recording on September 17th, airing on September 20th. We're doing, I think. So
I just read the intro, John.
Yeah. Ron Burgundy over here. If you put it on the prompter, he's going to say it, folks. Yeah, it looks like we didn't update that part of the
Go fuck yourself, San Diego. What does he say in the movie?
I'm
what does he
Ron Burgundy. So a classic, folks. Love Anchorman. Shane, good to be here. We're going to talk today a little bit about family and money, but this time talking to your children and likely adult children for part of it about money. But before we get to that, H's away this week, but her and I are hosting a really fun webinar next week. We want to plug that. We're going to be talking about renting versus buying. Shane, we should bring you on that webinar because didn't you just buy a place? Are you no longer a renter?
Well, it should be Friday, actually. It's been under contract since February, and it was a lease to buy situation. So yeah, maybe that would add some color for sure to the podcast. Yeah. It's also an international purchase. It's in Mexico City. The exchange rate was fluctuating as I was moving assets from the U.S. to Mexico. I had to open up a Mexican bank account. So yeah, it could add some color. I know this isn't y'all's. How many times have y'all done this podcast now, or this webinar now?
This will be our fourth year in a row doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it must be polished at this point. Yeah. It's usually your most popular podcast or webinar, isn't it?
Webinar. Yeah. Folks, we're recording this at 7:30 a.m. In Mexico City time for Shane. We had to move it up for his schedule today. And so
there's only one coffee shop open.
We're still waking up here.
Did you know that? Shane, they don't wake up that early here.
What have you been up to? I feel like you've been traveling around a little bit, a little bit of gallivanting. What's new? What's new in your life before we jump into things?
I love when I travel, it's gallivanting.
Yeah.
We've had this conversation before. Yeah, I did my, I don't want to rest on this too. We've talked a bit about on the last podcast. I was in Italy for a week after I volunteered at a grief camp for kids. I usually try to do something for myself after that, so I did an Italy trip. I read, for all of our reading listeners, I read My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante in Naples. So that was a very luxurious experience because it's all set over there in central Italy in Ischia. So yeah, good high-low type situation, volunteer and then take care of yourself, a little back and forth.
Love it.
Yeah. What about you, John? I love your Instagram presence. I think you did a apartment crawl recently.
I did an apartment crawl this weekend. So
Explain.
We're all old. I live in an apartment complex and we're all like late 20s, early to mid 30s. And it's kind of like being in college again, but you're not broke. And so, which is really nice. And so we did an apartment crawl this weekend. We had 8 different apartments. Everybody had like either a drink, a snack, an appetizer, a whole spread. And We got started at like 3:30 on Saturday, which is a little early for me to start drinking at this age. But it was a great time, and got to see a lot of different layouts for what people have on their walls, how they're spending their time setting up their place, and so a lot of fun. And lots of pets. I was the only person in the apartment crawl who didn't have a pet, so I feel a little singled out. So maybe I'll need to make some changes there. But it was a fun time.
Yeah, I liked your series of the dogs of the apartment complex. It was, 9 different dogs?
It was like 8 or 9 different dogs that I saw along the way.
What is better than going into someone else's house? Is there anything more fun for at least the first few minutes of just entering someone else's house and seeing how someone else lives?
Experience. Yeah. It's kind of like, sometimes it's like going to the zoo, but it is a fascinating experience.
Let me in your cage.
In some respects, it's like, oh, I really like how they laid it out. In other respects, sometimes you're like, wow, people actually live like this.
It's the Hillary Clinton meme where she's walking into the portrait.
Oh, that apartment. And she's like,
Hillary Clinton in the cramped apartment is one of the best memes ever made.
Yeah. She's so uncomfortable. But yeah, no, it was a grand old time, and really enjoyed it. And so if you're in one of those tiny apartments, or you're debating whether you should upgrade, join us next Tuesday, Rent versus Buy, the 24th, 5 p.m. Link on our website to register. AJ and I will be debating this topic, as we always do, in a potentially different interest rate environment, as the Fed is likely to cut rates this week. Between when we record this podcast and when it actually airs, we'll be getting a Fed decision. So that'll be fun.
When is that, tomorrow?
Yeah. FOMC's meeting today and tomorrow.
Okay, cool. So, looking forward to that. Okay, well, the content we have for today's podcast is a couple questions we have, some Reddit questions related to kids. So, John and I, being the experts that we are in rearing children, we'll be discussing the potential implications. Now, most of this is actually about estate planning and about training your kids on how to be money conscious and how to be personal finance specialists, or how to respect the dollar. So, first question is prepping kids for inheritance. John, you want to read this question, or let's paraphrase this question?
So there was one of the questions has to do with kids are standing to inherit a fairly significant amount of money, but in a long time, probably 30, 40, 50 years from now, parents are...
I have to pause there for you, because that's a really funny aspect of this question. Is the person says, "Yeah, I'm trying to set up an inheritance for my kids. They should be receiving $10 to $20 million when I die in 50 years.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
No potential variation in outcomes there as to what can happen. I'm currently gifting them $15,000 each per year. Didn't say how old the kids are, but it sounds like they're not in college yet, because they're saying they don't want the kids to have access to the funds until after college. What age should they receive the funds? How should I set up these funds that I want to leave my kids? And so I think, this is somebody who's thinking, maybe listen to the podcast that AJ and I did a little while back about gifting, and just starting to debate, how do I think about leaving money to my kids in an efficient way? There's a lot of different ways you could do it, right? You can do it with restrictions, without restrictions. You can gift the money outright. You can put money in a trust. It really depends on what outcomes do you want and what scenarios are you trying to protect. And I think there's this fun little balancing act between whether if you want more control, you will likely have a less tax advantaged outcome to this decision, but you may have a better outcome for your kids, and in terms of them not becoming, tied up to a trust fund and not motivated, that sort of thing. And so there's these really kind of fun balancing levers. Shane, you think about it. If neither one of us have kids, it's very rich that we're the ones answering these questions here today. But how do you feel about just, gifting money to kids and timing, and how to, I think Ron Lieber's term for it was the opposite of spoiled, but to not necessarily spoil them either. How do you feel about balancing those different outcomes out?
Yeah, what does he call that? I love Ron Lieber. The opposite of spoiled. He's a great writer.
That's the name of his book, I believe.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Well, first of all, definitely. So that the giving $15K per year to the kids sounds like a lot of money. It will be a lot of money in 20 years if they invest it, but it's not going to be a life-changing amount of money. Now, if you received $10 million, between 10 and 20 per kid, obviously that is a life-changing amount of money. It means you don't have to work anymore. So if it's in today's dollars, because 50 years from now, $10 million might be
like $100,000
today. Yeah, it might not be that much money. So let's. I'm assuming the nature of the question or the spirit of the question is $10 million of today's dollars. So yeah, that means that you could essentially take home about $300,000 each year, which is what over $30K per month.
Almost $30K a month. Yeah.
Yeah, so for the rest of time and not have to worry about ever touching the principal.
Yeah.
So you would be living very upper middle class, potentially upper class upper middle class for sure, without having to worry about working again. So what does Buffett say? I want to give my kids enough money so that they never have to work, or enough so they never have to worry, but not enough money that they never have to work. I think that's his principle when it comes to so they can do whatever they want, but they can't do nothing. That's what it is. They can do whatever they want with their lives, but they can't do nothing. I think we should use that principle here as well. I think if you give them $10 million without any strings attached, then they can do nothing. Unfortunately. So in the spirit of the question, I think this person's saying, at what age should they receive the money so that they feel the urge, or they have that built-in ability to work, or that desire to work, or they have ambition, or they don't feel like life is about just sitting around and cashing checks. So he says, I think I should give it to him at age 30. The comments down below, by the way, are really funny, because somebody else said that she didn't know that she was worth $20 million until she was 45. She said, thanks, Dad, but it would have been nice to know that ahead of time, because there was I think there was 20 years, maybe 25 years of struggle.
Yeah.
I think 45 is too late. I think your kids could be 25 by the time you're 45.
You could be dead. you know what I mean? Like you could be diagnosed with some like critical illness or something. I think, but I also think like 18 is too young, 22 is too young, probably 25 is too young to give somebody a huge chunk of money. You know, I don't, it's a balancing act. I think if you're trying to have a legacy that is gifting within your family and giving to the next generation, I think there's also this really strong incentive to give while you're alive so that you can see what your child does with it and how it changes their lives. Maybe they want to start a business. Maybe they want to buy a home to raise their kids in, that sort of thing. The amount of money we're talking about here, right? Tens of millions of dollars potentially. You run a very significant risk of, your child being unmotivated. If they were to get this at too young of an age and maybe not working, maybe not, finishing college, that sort of thing. And so you need to balance that out with how long do you hold this back? And I think that's the wonderful thing about tools like trusts, where you can have requirements that are both quantitative and qualitative in order to get distributions from the trust. You need to be at least 30 years old. You need to have obtained a college degree. You need to be gainfully employed. You need to not be addicted to drugs, gambling, alcohol, whatever it might be. Those sorts of things that you give your trustee, who you need to trust, some degree of discretion about what those, where somebody needs to be in life in order to get money out of this. Otherwise, you run the risk of, it just kind of becoming a piggy bank for somebody and them not having to work.
Yeah, you mentioned some negative things. It reminds me, there's also some positive things, like in terms of you're saying, things that would push back your maturity, right? Like being addicted to drugs, not having a college degree, not being a certain age. I'm trying to think of the ones that would push you forward in maturity. It reminds me of that meme that 28 with kids in the suburbs is 40 in the city without kids, and vice versa. Yeah. Kind of deal. So having kids, like if you have kids, maybe for each kid we push this forward 2 years. Yeah. Something like that.
It could be that. It
creates up two subsemptas though, like maybe I'll have 10 kids so that I can
exactly. There goes all the trust money though. So be careful. I think that's a fair point. I think that's a fair point. And a lot of times with some of these trusts, we're talking about access for certain things always, right? Access for money for your education, right? If you're going to go to medical school, then you can access the money before you're 30 to pay your tuition, right? And to pay for your housing while you're in medical school. I don't think we should disincentivize that, behavior. But if you're going to, rent a place in Miami and, hang out with your buddies all the time and not work, then we're not going to pay the rent for that, right? Just, having some degree of discretion on that part, right?
Yeah, that's funny. It also makes you think about the executor of these trusts, right? Because you're going to have somebody that is actually implementing this. Like if you're gone, they're going to be the ones that are qualitatively reviewing. I'm the executor of a few trusts, which I have not had to take care of yet. I'm sorry, I'm the trustee of a few trusts, so I have not had to implement them yet, but I'm looking forward to it. So there's going to be a qualitative element, like if they go to medical school, is it like in the Caribbean or is it like one that we want here? I mean, no shade on those Caribbean medical schools, but like a Cuban medical school is going to be a lot different from a anyway.
Tuition at a Cuban medical school? That's a different question, I guess.
They had their own vaccines down there.
Oh,
the efficacy is debatable.
Dun, dun, dun. Shane, you're looking very celestial right now, by the way, with this the sun in the background.
The sun, here. Let me adjust.
It's morning in Mexico City, folks.
We're getting low angle sunlight here in the living room. What else should we cover in here? I mean, what age? I mean, there's also the hush money aspect of this. Like if you're putting all these clauses in here, if you go to college or if you have kids, it'll adjust the timing of the release of the trust. Are you telling your kids about the default age? Let's say the default age is 35, but if you have kids, it brings it down 2 years per kid, and then medical school debt, you'll get that as an early payoff. But what if they don't even know about the trust? Therefore, they start working and they have that early work ethic and they have a little bit more ambition or that feeling that there's no safety net for them to fall into. So they have to believe that they're in this world on their own. But how are you really going to hide? If you're hiding that in order to create this will to work, so to speak, or this ambition, then you're also lying to your kids, right?
Yeah. But I also think that there's a degree of discretion involved, right? You don't need to leave the money to your kids. You can leave it to charity. You can do something else with it. And so that's this balancing act between hey, if your kid doesn't meet the qualifications that you think they should meet in order to receive this money, and so you think otherwise this is just going to spoil them, so to speak, you don't need to leave the money to them or leave as much as you thought you were going to. You can give it to charity. You can give it to another family member. You can do lots of things with it. And so that in and of itself may be, a factor in keeping this somewhat secret. I don't know.
What if you're the trustee of a trust and you know this kid? You probably know the kid, right?
Probably. You would.
It's probably not a
want
stranger.
the trustee to know who the kid is.
Yeah. And so this kid and the kid's like teetering on the edge of qualifying for this money. And you're like, you know what? I care more about the Sacred Heart School of Cat. Like, I'm going to give all your inheritance. This $10 million is going to go.
You didn't get it.
To United Way. Just throw your relationship with this child under the bus.
That's why a lot of trusts have...
now adult with kids potentially. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's why, as a trustee, you have a fiduciary duty to all the beneficiaries of the trust. And you have, there's typically remedies for beneficiaries of trust to essentially fire a trustee or contest a decision of a trustee that they feel is wrong. And so what would happen in that scenario is that you'd probably end up taking them to court, the trustee to court, if you couldn't agree on something and say, hey, I think I've met this, and some probate court would weigh in as to whether you did or not.
Yeah. I was Googling the funniest clauses in wills in preparation for this. And I saw apparently a relative worked for a firm preparing wills and was confronted by an executor who had an edict to scatter the deceased ashes from a microlight aircraft. But the executor couldn't fly one. So the lawyer said it didn't stipulate whether or not the plane had to be in flight at the time of the scattering.
Ooh.
So they just scattered it. They just rented one and just scattered it. So the interpretation of wills is going to be a pain in the ass for everybody. Yeah. You got to get an experienced person. If you get anything goofy in there, anything weird, you're just really opening the door for interpretations that are not in the spirit of the deceased's original intent, for sure.
Yeah. Now I there's another question that we saw that was posed, which is kind of a different scenario, and I want to dig into a little bit because I think this is something that might actually be more common than the I have $10 million that I'm going to leave my kids someday, which is, hey, I'm in a fairly wealthy situation. I've got a kid who's 24 years old. He just told me he has $30,000 in credit card debt from online sports betting. He's got a business degree from a good college. He's never asked me for money. He's working. He works for a bank, man in finance, right? I could pay his debt off right now, but I don't know. I'm really thrown for a loop. I want to help my kid out. I've never been in this situation before, though, and how do I navigate this? And this is very different because this is not up to some trustee. This is a parent and a child who's made a mistake, who's struggling, that you could make go away, but should you? And how do you handle that? What's your take on that, Shane?
Yeah. I mean, this is really interesting. So the guy describes himself also as upper middle class. So he's been a lurker in this sub because I guess this is rich people personal finance. I guess $5 million of net worth is only upper middle class. And he's
I don't know if I agree with that notion, but nonetheless, okay.
I like to think
everybody thinks they're middle class, by the way. Just about everybody either know you're poor or you think you're middle class. That is like 95% of the population.
Yeah, because if you're actually upper class, that means that wealth redistribution should be happening to you, like
in theory,
happening for you, right? So yeah, we're all middle class, except if we're poor, in which case we want that wealth redistribution. Yeah, so I think that's part of the psychology there. Anyway, so he's got a kid that's 24 that has a business degree who's supposedly never asked him for money, and I imagine that's because he's paid for everything his entire life. So you don't have to ask for money when daddy pays for everything already. Sorry, I'm not jaded at all. So he's asking if he should pay off this kid's credit card debt. First of all,
gambling debt, essentially.
You already hugely fucked up if you think that your kid should have his credit card debt from online gambling be paid off to the tune of $25,000. Jesus Christ. He works at a bank. So you've set this kid up for the future. I think you've done enough for this kid.
Yeah,
is my first thought. He's working in investment banking. You know how hard those jobs are to get.
It didn't say investment banking. I think it just said banking, but yeah.
It's true. He could be a teller at a JP Morgan Chase.
I mean, he has a Big Ten business degree. I'm guessing he's probably not a bank teller, but I'm guessing maybe he's an analyst or something somewhere, you know.
You're the Big Ten guy. What does that mean? Does that mean it's
just a Big Ten college? So maybe Michigan, Indiana, Penn State, Rutgers. I don't know. Could mean a lot of
I love how
there's more than 10 schools in the Big Ten now, so
well, I love how that was like we're rating or we're categorizing our schools by their football teams in this case.
Yeah, perhaps.
What the fuck does a football team have to do with what he went to college? It's okay. I got a degree from an SEC school. It's like, well, okay, that's everywhere from University of Texas to Mississippi State, my guy. Like, there's a big, wide range of degrees you can get here. It doesn't really mean anything. So I love that. Like, that's a little bit of a red flag in terms of setting this kid up for success. But yeah. Credit card debt. He's never asked for money before in his life. I mean, as someone that had a job from 14, since I was 14, I'm a little bit biased here. The kid's got to work his way out of this one. Maybe if you were going to like compromise, the credit card interest payments are going to be a nightmare. 24,000. I mean, how did you even? This kid's credit. If he's probably not going to be able to pay the interest payments on the credit card debt. I mean, if they're at 20% interest per year. What's the interest on that, John?
$6,000 a year on $30,000 in credit card debt.
So $6,000 a year. You're talking about like $500 a month
just for that.
He's fresh out of school. That's a big burden.
Yeah.
Then again, he has no student loans, so I don't know.
I'm guessing.
Figure it out. What is your take? Sorry, I got a little spicy.
No. I mean, I agree. I mean, I've never, thankfully never had to go ask my parents for money for something like this. And I mean, I think this is a bigger, gambling is an addiction. It is incredibly prevalent these days as it has become less regulated in terms of being able to do it on your phone, online. You can bet on literally like anything you want, except on presidential elections, on elections in the United States, apparently. But just about anything you want. And so it's very...
Wait, what's going on with that? I thought that we could do that.
I don't think we can. I think only foreigners can bet on U.S. elections.
That's a VPN problem, right? Like we. I love VPN problems personally.
Shane in Mexico City, maybe you can. But this is somebody who, let's say, what if it wasn't gambling? What if it was drugs? I have $30,000 in debt from drugs. You wouldn't pay it off then if you were the parent, right?
No.
I mean, this is listen, some people like to gamble. That's their thing. It's not my thing. I'm not here to judge anybody. But I don't think you're going to set your child up to be successful if you are going to, you've got gambling debt on your credit card, right? We're going to pay it off. Just as if they said, hey, there's a bookie at my door that I owe $30,000 to. Could you go to the bank and get me some cash? It would also be a tricky situation. What you want to do in this situation, I think, is how do you help this child not be in this situation again, right? And so maybe if you're the parent here, hopefully you have a financial advisor or something. Maybe the kid can go talk to them about, hey, I got myself into some debt. How do I get myself out of it, right? This kid needs to read a Dave Ramsey book, quite frankly, about how to get out of credit card debt. That's blocking and tackling financial planning 101. And then, if you're the parent, you might say, well, can I go to Gamblers Anonymous with you? Can I go to something with you to help you with this? Because, getting into $30,000 in gambling debt from online sports betting is very concerning. And if not dealt with, could wreak havoc for this person's entire adult financial life. And so it's really thinking about how do I solve the root cause of the problem here? And throwing money at the credit card bill doesn't really alleviate the issue, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, three things. I'm with you on that. Three things. I mean, you said it's going to ruin his entire financial life. I don't know. I think you declare bankruptcy at 24. By the time you're 31, I'm serious. That shit drops off your
If you're working in banking with your business degree, you probably don't want to declare bankruptcy. So that's the other thing to keep in mind.
I have no sympathy for this kid, by the way. You can tell.
I'm aware.
The other thing I've noticed is that the kid did not come, or at least the parent. How does the parent know about the debt? The kid must have come to the parent.
The kid came to him and asked for the money to pay it off. Yeah.
Okay. So really bad red flag there. If I had found out separately that my kid was trying to deal with it, I would be more incentivized to help them, right? Like if the kid had come to me and said, hey, I tried to transfer it to a 0% interest credit card. I've already transferred $10K, but $14K is still on like a 30% interest rate. Here's what I've Googled. I can't really do anything because I can't get any new credit cards because of the situation I'm currently in. I'm going to Gamblers Anonymous. In that case, I would consider paying off the interest, consider matching any payments that the kid made. If he made $1,000 contribution, I would pay $1,000. I would match it every time, things of that nature. But the fact that he just rocked up, just knocked on daddy's door and said, hey, I goofed. You got this, right?
Well,
situation.
I mean, here's a potential way to handle it. Okay.
I'm assuming it's a boy, by the way.
Yeah, his son.
Okay. Yeah.
Here's one potential way to handle it. Say, okay, listen, I don't like the credit card companies. I don't like the big banks. I don't want them making a bunch of money off of you. I'm going to pay off the $30,000, and you're going to make me monthly payments until you pay back the full $30,000. And we're going to go every week to Gamblers Anonymous together, or whatever it is, to get you some help. Those are the conditions. Would you like to either pay the credit card companies 25% and I don't help you at all? Or you can pay me 0%, or technically the applicable federal rate if we're being technical about it from an IRS perspective and family loans. But and we'll handle it that way.
But Dad's only got $5 million, remember, so he doesn't have to worry about the estate tax. So
he doesn't need to worry about the estate tax.
This could be implied gifts, so it could be fine.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think this is a scenario people see more often than I've got $10 million in great children, and what age should I give them to, right? What age should I set that up for? But it's tricky. I think this comes back to, though, Shane, just thinking about, and maybe we can wrap up with some thoughts on this, but how to talk to your kids about money when they are young, to set them up to be successful, to be financially independent, that sort of thing. And I'd be curious, Shane, did you have conversations with your parents about money and savings when you were younger? What are things that you remember from being, when you were 14 and got your first job, and savings and that sort of thing that maybe you carried with you or you've learned from or built upon?
I don't remember any conversations with my parents about that. I do remember getting my first paycheck. I remember I worked minimum wage, ice cream stand or snow cone stand, and then at a sports training facility at the batting cages. And then I started working in restaurants, which was interesting because you got paid $2 an hour plus tips. And like there's the idea of pooling tips and like how do you earn tips and how do you work hard in order, which I think was really helpful. I think working as a waiter, I think Sally Krawcheck of Elevest says that working as in service is one of the best trainings you can have for being an adult because you have to be extroverted and do public speaking and you have to talk to people you don't want to talk to and stuff. And I echo that. I really enjoyed that. But then when it comes to actual money management, I remember spending like $1,500 on some speakers for my car. Like that was like a huge, $1,500 when you're working minimum wage in Mississippi is like a ton of money. So
yeah.
I
It's
learned
like a year's
about
worth of work.
yeah. So and then it depreciates super rapidly. And that was cool when you're 17. And then when you get to college, like that's not cool anymore. Like everything becomes about like fratty stuff and things of that nature. So what's cool when you're that age is not going to be what's cool. But you learn lessons like that. Like, I think having a job and having your own money and having to spend your own money, like it teaches you lessons about like the durability and the endurance and like the longevity and like it teaches you to save it and like the 20%. So I don't remember not to answer your question, I don't remember any explicit conversations about money with my parents because my mom famously is super private about money and has these scrawled notebooks where she keeps all of her calculations in chicken scratch. I just got her tax deductions, by the way. I just scanned pages of her notebook, of course. Shout out Sherry Mason. What about you, John? We're almost out of time. I'm sorry to hog the mic there. What you got?
No worries. No, I think that, I have a few things that come to mind. One is that, I was very lucky to start saving very early, and I had a little passbook savings account. I still have the book in my other desk drawer of like deposits from like 1997 that I was making that were $1, $2 a piece. Somebody gave you a couple bucks, and my grandmother's house is right next to the bank. And so if somebody gave me some cash, I would just go deposit it. Right? And put it in the bank. I'm sure the tellers were like, dear God, this guy's in here again. But like
$3 deposit.
yeah, exactly. No, literally. They're really tight deposits.
It's endearing and also,
and so, but I remember doing that, and I think that like that helped create savings habits. And I remember getting my first paycheck for my first job. I was 15. I worked Saturday mornings for like 3.5 hours and literally was making like, my paychecks would be like $42. And I'd be like on top of the world. I'm like, oh, this is great. You know what I mean? Like I'm making money. And so, I think really when we think about these scenarios of how do we avoid somebody getting into the gambling debt? How do we make sure that if you are going to leave money to your kids someday, that they don't become spoiled, that you have hardworking kids? I think you go step back. When they are young, you train them to save and save often. You get them a job as soon as they can start working. It could be the ice cream stand. It could be the radio station like it was for me. It could be wherever. It could be waiting tables and whatever it is, bussing tables, so that they learn that like, hey, you work, you earn money, you pay taxes, and you start to save some of it, and just get them accustomed to it. What do you think, Shane?
100%. Bonus points if you get them to open a Roth IRA. That would be amazing. And for entrepreneurial business owners over here, you can pay your kids. You can shift income from your tax bracket to your kids, open the Roth IRA, save a ton of money. But that's usually a paid situation advice that we provide to our entrepreneurial owners. So it
has to make sense for the business. So
For sure. We're a little bit over, John. You want to read us out?
I'll read us out. Thank you for listening to the Liquidity Event. Email us your questions and financial problems to liquidityevent@brooklynfi.com. Leave us a voicemail at memo.fm/theliquidityevent, and we'll play it on the air. And finally, if you want to be weird about it, you can leave us a review. He's Shane Mason. I'm John Owens for AJ Ayers this week. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.